Hi everybody, welcome to another session of Yeshiva Classroom, and we're here every week at this same time, and you can catch us. So we're talking about Judaism, Torah, the beauty of the Torah, and of course the Torah, which stands for so many beautiful thoughts, and it's our way of life, and it is a tradition. I have a picture of George Washington here, and exactly what is a tradition, or a Masorah, as the Jews know it to be. In other words, we have George Washington, here's a picture of him, but how many people know that he really lived? And how do we know that he really did live? And that's because there is a tradition. In other words, the people at the time when he lived knew that he was the president, and he was known to be a person of high stature, and has served as the President of the United States. So these facts were handed over to people in that generation, and they in turn handed it over to their children, and they in turn handed it over to the next generation. And that's what we mean by tradition, or Masorah, the act of transmitting a culture or a religion by word of mouth. By word of mouth, transmitting the fact that the Jewish people were there present at Mount Sinai and heard the speaking of God giving over the Ten Commandments, and the people were there, and in turn they told their children, those that were not born yet, and they in turn told their peers and children from one generation to the next generation. Just as we know that George Washington lived through a tradition, for a Masorah, handing it down to people who in turn handed it down to their people. As a matter of fact, God, on speaking to Isaiah, told him, "The spirit that I put on you, and the thoughts that I give over to you shall not depart from you, your children, your offspring, your offspring's offsprings, and your offspring's offspring's offsprings." That's written in the book of Isaiah, in chapter 57, verse 20. So the Jewish people have this tradition, and unfortunately, there are within us people that don't follow this tradition. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about Jewish people, and when the Jewish people went over the Jordan and occupied the land, and prior to going over in chapter 29 in Deuteronomy, it speaks of the fact that in chapter 29 verse 13 that this covenant that I make with you is incumbent upon you and and the people that are standing here today, and the people that are destined to come in the future, your offspring. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 29, 13. And chapter 29, verse 13. So So while we're on the subject of chapter 29 in Deuteronomy, we might make mention of the fact that chapter 29 verse 28 in Deuteronomy says that God is responsible for the hidden transgressions, but man is responsible for the transgressions that are openly espoused. And of course, we are to reprimand and reprove and point out that these are transgressions that might have or will occur in the times of our life, and when we see our co-religionists going astray. And one thing that is very paramount is the fact that people have set up all kinds of cultural organizations and claim them to be a branch of Judaism, a denomination, which is not so. There is no denominations in Judaism. There are no denominations in Judaism. People like Rabbi Judy's come along and say, well, look, this is the 21st century. They didn't have those objects or those different things that we have in the 21st century, like riding a car on Shabbos or electric light bulbs on Shabbos. And here we have somebody like a Rabbi Judy and says, oh look, we don't need that today. We have to be good people. That's the main thing. But the 10 Commandments are divided between man and God and between man and man. They were all given at the same time at Sinai in chapter 20 to 24 in Exodus. Now, Judge Kavanaugh, when he went for the hearings on his Supreme Court nominations, he constantly used the term precedents. In other words, there were precedents that he follows on different cases and their rulings that came from those cases that maybe had happened 100 years ago. But they set precedents, and he combines that with the law and the precedent, or we might say it's a form of transmission, a heritage, a transmission, a Masorah from one generation to another generation. And Judge Kavanaugh used that to explain that he bases his decision on the law and the precedents that came before. Now you have somebody like Judge Judy's and these Hillel organizations on campus that have led the people astray throughout, like the Reform and the Reconstructionists. They want to do changes, but they have no basis to do so. They don't have precedents because they never studied precedents. Okay? Right? We have precedents that came before that they never studied in the Gemara and all the books. Let me bring this to some kind of a head and deal further in that subject. And that, the Pirkei Avos is part of a Talmud, a parak of our fathers, that is read usually between Pesach and Shavuos. But anyway, the first parak, the first chapter says, Moses received the Torah from Sinai. He transmitted it over to Joshua, and Joshua transmitted it over to the prophets and the Kohanim, and they in turn transmitted it over to the Zikanim, the elders, who in turn transmitted it over to the men of the Great Assembly, that being led by Ezra. Ezra the scribe, the righteous individual, the book of Ezra, Nehemiah, in the one of the 24 books of the Torah, right? Ezra, Nehemiah, it's all one book, not like they want to divide it up. But anyway, they say that the last of the prophets was Malachi, Zechariah, and yeah, so they say that Malachi was really Ezra, and he was that transitional stage that that received it from the prophets to the men of the Great Assembly, right? And he goes on, and they said three things. But the point I want to make out is that, right, we have Moses received it on Mount Sinai, and the people, they handed over the teachings, transmitted it to the Joshua. Joshua in turn transmitted it to the elders, to the Zikanim. And who are the elders, right? What are we talking about? Here we have in Behold the People, Rabbi Millers, he writes, the elders, and this term is found throughout the pages of our history. The 70 elders of Israel, Exodus 24:1, and Exodus 24:9. It speaks about the elders who accompany Moses to see Paro. And they were equal in name to the Sanhedrin. 70 elders were 70 righteous men, learned men who sat on the Sanhedrin, this like the Supreme Court of Judaism. So, but here we have Moses to Joshua to the elders. And they lived for a long time after Joshua. Again, the elders of the congregation, it's mentioned in Shoftim, Judges 21:16. The elders of Israel, and mentioned in Samuel 1, the book of Samuel, chapter 4, verse 3. All the elders of Israel gathered and came to Samuel. That's chapter 8, verse 4 in Samuel. In other words, the elders were throughout the history of the Jews, and it was usually an assemblage of people who heard the Torah being handed over by the head of this assembly, the elder, usually the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And here it goes on, elders of my people, Samuel 15:30. Avner spoke to the elders of Israel, Samuel 2, verse 3:17. Again, the elders of Israel came to the king, Samuel 2, verse 5 and 3. Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, 1 Kings 8, chapter 8, verse 1. The king of Israel called all the elders, Kings 20, verse 7. The point I'm making is that the elders were an integral part in this handing down of this tradition, this Masorah, just like we got from George Washington, right? We got the Masorah, the transmission was given over, and these precedents were continued on. So again, the first parak in Pirkei Avos, you see, Judaism has a basis, and the basis has got to be learned, and that's why we have the Orthodox. They call them Orthodox, right? Right? Because they go in and delve all the way back to the beginning, right? We have a beginning of our Torah. We have the beginning and creation of the world too. But the beginning of our Torah stemmed from not only Abraham, who passed on those teachings to Isaac and Jacob, but also they were taught at the time they went into slavery in Egypt, right? So when they entered into Egypt, Joseph was, Amram was, when Joseph died, when Joseph, the son of Jacob, one of the 12 sons, and he had rule over the Jewish people while they were in slavery in Goshen. And when he died, Amram, the father of Moses, was born. So what are we saying? This transition of Torah from Sinai starts with Abraham, where he was commanded by God, you know, in Genesis chapter 26:5. Abraham was commanded to go to Ur Kasdim. Abraham was to leave from Ur Kasdim to Canaan. He left. He followed the commandments. Abraham was commanded to perform circumcision on himself and his children. He was commanded. God commanded Abraham to go down to Egypt. He was commanded. God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his son. He was commanded. So those commandments were spoken of and possibly written down when the Jews went into slavery, and they studied these teachings, which later became the integral part of the Torah. But now the people en masse, when they were delivered, they heard at Mount Sinai not only the teachings of Abraham, but also the basic teachings of the Torah. The Ten Commandments, the Torah, was given to the Jewish people. It was given to the Jewish people alone. The Gentiles have been given 7 commandments, but the Jews have been given the 613 commandments that are found in the Torah. But we have this transition. We have a precedent. We follow the precedents and then combine that with the law, with the Torah, to make a decision. In Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 10, and those sentences over there, it says, if there is a difficult matter within you, then you're to go to the head chief judge or a teacher in that generation, which was done, and submit your problem and your case to that judge, the highest judge, and he's to make a ruling, and we are to follow that ruling. We are to follow that ruling of what the judge commanded, and not to make rulings based on, well, it makes sense. This is the 21st century. Those people that are listening here, or whatever, and you're in college, and then you're going to go to Judge Judy, who got a crash course in becoming ignorant, and then transmit that degree of ignorance to their congregations. You don't want to be part of that. You want to study and you want to learn what Judaism is all about. And it's not easy. It's not easy if you really want to do a good job. If you want to make shortcuts, you can go to Judge Judy, who makes people feel that they have a permission to transgress a basic commandment and therefore feel good because Judge Judy said it was okay. So much for that. We have, learning Talmud Torah is Keneged Kulam. The study of Torah is equal to all the commandments. And the problem is a very simple problem, and no one wants to address it. And I'm talking about the Orthodox. The Orthodox, the very observant Jews. Those Jews in the Orthodox synagogue, most of them have never received a in-depth training in Judaism, right? Even if they went to day school, it's not really a something that will give us a great amount of knowledge. And the Orthodox recognize this. So what do? They have classes. The Orthodox rabbis in their synagogues, and they have lectures, and they talk, and they prepare. Just like like I'm doing over here. I'm doing all the work, preparing the teachings that I'm trying to give over, although not in a very astute way, because I'm not an astute person. I'm not a astute, knowledgeable person. But I like to troubleshoot a little bit, and what I find is, over the years, adult education in the Orthodox synagogue is just a total waste, because very few continue. What percentage of the congregants attend adult education? And the reason is because the rabbi or the teacher is doing all the talking. And therefore, the student, the catcher, he's only going to receive so much. And if he doesn't review it, and he doesn't have a book to review it in, it's going to be lost. So I proposed to a number of rabbis of Orthodox synagogues in my neighborhood, I said, what needs to be done is that they, after the service, should be encouraged to spend at least 20-25 minutes a day looking into some kind of a sefer or a book, depending what level you're at. And they should be fitted out with that particular book. And and let's say if we can get compliance during the day when you're waiting for the subway, when you're on the bus traveling, when you're walking in the street. Review some of the works that you learned, and everyone should feel comfortable what they're learning and what level they're at. And that's why everyone can get on the basic ideology of Torah, which Rabbi Miller, Victor Miller, gives in all of his books. He has an explanation of every sentence in the Torah. It's 5 books of explanations of the meaning of the different sentences in the Torah. All in English, all in readable English. And the basic book, Behold the People. Behold the People by Rabbi Miller will condense in very readable form all the 24 books of the Bible. All the 24 books of the Bible in very succinct form. So I encourage that mass of humanity that is not knowledgeable in Torah to get Behold the People. You can buy it at Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon. Behold a People by Miller. Now, he didn't think of these things on his own. He didn't come to the conclusion that the comments that he makes are basically from his head. No! He got this from the transmission. The transmission. Just like we have President Washington. We know through transmission that he was the president. And that's how Rabbi Millers got his information from, and he brought it down into book form. He got it from the previous generations that studied in the Slobodka Yeshiva, which was a suburb of Kiev, Poland, which was destroyed during the Holocaust, right? Which was destroyed during the Holocaust. But Slobodka Yeshiva got it from Western Europe, who got it from Spain, who got it from the land of Israel, and it was passed down to generation, and continues in America. They used to have a yeshiva in Far Rockaway, but I think they have one in Lakewood, New Jersey. But the point is that each member should be encouraged to take upon himself a book that he feels comfortable with, and learn it for X amount of minutes a day. Take 20 minutes, take 25 minutes, but try and do that 20-25 minutes during the day or at night. You know, the prophet Micha said three things to individuals: do kindliness, love justice, and walk humbly with God. And walk humbly with God, not arrogant, but walk humbly, meaning that in your spare time, when you're daydreaming or thinking about the sports events, put a little Torah in those minutes, so that you can accumulate X amount of minutes that you took upon yourself to do. And of course, you know, they have Daf Yomi, which studies a page of the Gemara every day. You can get the book, there's 70 volumes of that, and you can do a page a day. You could be kept up with all the classes that are throughout the world that conduct Daf Yomi. But you know, I find the classes, if you don't prepare for the class, I don't think it's such a worthwhile to do. If you don't prepare, if you don't review, if you don't study beforehand what is going to be taught. But again, how many minutes do you have? You know, that's another question. You know, while we were speaking about Judge Kavanaugh and of his hearings, the precedents that he bases the law on, we might go into a little bit of politics, although it's really off limits, so to speak. But this is public access. You say whatever you want, but basically we're geared to Torah, Judaism, and the Jewish people, and the love they have for the importance of learning Torah. But the important fact is that we find ourselves in exile, and we must abide by the laws of the country of the United States of America. And just to think that here we have a President Trump who has done so much more than any other president in this short a time. The GNP, the unemployment rate has fallen. The hourly wage has risen. All of these under his administration and under the workers he has under him to do these jobs. And you would think that the losers should come together and unite under President Trump and encourage us all to